Everybody see the record button there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we are recording. Greetings, everyone. From Covenant Calendar Club, we pray that you will be richly blessed by the words that you receive out of the Torah and out of the mouth of our teachers and those that are sharing this presentation this evening. And we would like to welcome you with a big warm shout out and say, shall we, everyone?
Shalom, shalom.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome. Once again, we are glad that you are here. And with that said, we're going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to Timothy and Jeanette.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm glad everybody's here. There's one thing that I want to make very, very certain that's understood well tonight. We are bringing out a bunch of quotes that Charlene and I have found as our studies have continued and progressed. But I want to be sure you know that, well, as Charlene and I were reluctant to bring these out because we want everyone to understand the dawn day from Scripture first and foremost. These quotes are second only as a witness. And it's interesting, if you read through these quotes, some of them, if you don't understand Scriptures properly, you might get a misunderstanding from some of these quotes. So I want these recorded. I want these on the website, but I want everybody to remember, these are only second witnesses. These are not proof. These are second witnesses, and they're to be treated as such. Okay, I'm going to bring up my share screen here and see what we can bring up for you here. Okay, secular historical quotes regarding the commencement of Yahuwah's days and Sabbaths. What do some well-known commentators understand about the morning day start? Introduction. All emphasis has been supplied for the purposes of learning. Thus far, the Scriptures have been thoroughly examined, from which should come all understanding on Yahuwah's commencement of this day. It is always best to trust in the plethora of scriptural evidence. However, for those that are interested in outside thoughts on how, when, and why this change of the order of the day came about, please read the following with caution, as it is difficult to truly document the validity of any of these writings. It is interesting that although these comments come from a wide variety of commentators who may not agree on many points of doctrine, they do agree that the Scripture day begins at first light in the morning. Even though hundreds of pages from commentaries could be supplied from either viewpoint, each one would have to be tested by the Scriptures and not man's tradition, Talmud, or any other historical source. And when we say tested by the Scriptures, I'd like to define that just a little bit better. And they should be tested by the Torah first and foremost. Here's a caution. Many commentators use the term sunrise rather than morning twilight, which is constantly an ever-confusing issue. So when you see sunrise in here, in these quotes, it's most likely because the people did not understand the depth of when the light started. Their study hadn't been complete. So I'm hoping that when each one sees the term sunrise, they will think dawn, if it's possible. And this thing seems to be frozen on me. Oh, there we go. Rabbinical Commentaries, Shemuel ben Meir, 1085 to 1158, also known as Rashbam. Now, this is a very popular name, and we hear lots from this man. Rashbam was learned from his grandfather, Rashi. Rashbam was a biblical commentator and Talmudist, with his commentary on the Torah renowned for its stress on the plain meaning, peshat, of the text. Rashbam's Genesis, Commentary on Genesis 1:1-23. To remind the Jewish people of the reason for the observance of the Shabbat as described in the Ten Commandments, Moses told the story of creation. At the time when the upper heavens and the earth had already been created, a long or a short time before the acts related in Genesis, the earth as we know it was completely empty, for water covered it up to the upper heavens. Darkness that was not night, and I'm going to repeat that, darkness that was not night, that would be night as we know it, was over the depths, and there was no light in the heavens. A wind blew across the waters. Elohim said, "Let there be light," to correct the lack of light, and there was light. And Elohim looked at the light and saw that it was beautiful. Elohim divided the light into a unit of 12 hours, and the darkness into a unit of 12 hours. Elohim named the newly formed unit of 12 hours of light day, and the newly formed unit of 12 hours of darkness night. And they have been so called ever since. Now, note the highlight. Day always preceded night. Daylight turned to evening as its light faded. Then morning broke as the morning stars signaled the end of the night. The first of the 6 days of creation, referred to in the Ten Commandments, was thus completed, and the second day began. Now, I'm just going to skip down to number 8, and I'm going to read that. I may not read what's all on these slides, and it's going to be posted on the website so that you can go back over it and read what I'm going to miss. But we have a lot of slides to read, so I'm probably going to skip a little bit. So let's go to number 8. Elohim named the expanse heaven, and it has been so called ever since. Daylight turned to evening as its light faded. Then morning broke as the morning stars signaled the end of the night. The second of the 6 days of creation, referred to in the Ten Commandments, was thus completed, and the third day began. And jumping down to number 13, daylight turned to evening as its light faded. Then morning broke as the morning stars signaled the end of the night. The third of the 6 days of creation, referred to in the Ten Commandments, was thus completed, and the fourth day began. And we're going to skip this slide completely, and we'll go to the number 18. To rule during the day and the night, and to signal the beginning of day with the rising of the sun, and the beginning of night with the setting of the sun, and the appearance of the stars. Elohim looked at the heavenly bodies and saw that they were beautiful. Daylight turned to evening as its light faded. Okay, that would be the twilight zone that we know as a Rev. That twilight zone faded. Then morning broke as the morning stars signaled the end of night. The fourth of 6 days of creation, referred to in the Ten Commandments, was thus completed, and the fifth day began. And we're going to go down to the 23rd portion again. Daylight turned to evening as its light faded. Then morning broke as the morning stars signaled the end of night. The fifth of the 6 days of creation, referred to in the Ten Commandments, was thus completed, and the sixth day began. As you can see, he carries that same thought through for each and every day. He does not deviate from that. And we're going to skip this slide completely. You can read that later, same as this one. And let's go on to the purple highlighted part. Once again, daylight turned to evening as its light faded. There's your twilight. Then morning broke as the morning stars signaled the end of the night. The sixth of the 6 days of creation, referred to in the Ten Commandments, was thus completed, and the seventh day began. So there's full continuity through the days of the week. The Shabbat was blessed with all goodness because Elohim had provided for the needs and sustenance of all Elohim's creatures. Elohim sanctified the seventh day because on it, Elohim rested from all the work which Elohim had created and done. Now here's the conclusion. Rashbam is thus of the opinion that the day begins and ends in the morning. Very interesting when you consider his background. And we have a special reader here. Stacy, can you help me out?
Yes, I can. I got to get that off the screen there. Okay, so I had to practice some of these names. But, Ibn Ezra's comments on Genesis 1:5, by naming the light day and the darkness night, the diurnal sphere revolved once. Day blended into evening and night blended into dawn. Day 1. Elohim understood that all that Elohim had created was very good. The diurnal, that's difficult to say, diurnal sphere revolved once. Day blended into evening and night blended into dawn, the 6 days from day 1. The days of creation thus begin and end at daybreak, not at evening. At the end of the day, there was an evening and then a morning, day 1.
Stacy, could you please reread point number 9 for us, please?
Sure. The days of creation thus begin and end at daybreak, not at evening.
Thank you. He's pretty certain on that. It's pretty profound.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Okay, so who is Ibn Ezra? 1092 to 1176 AD. I actually looked him up, and he's a Jewish biblical commentator, and he is in the area of Tudela, Spain, which is going to be the next person I'm going to talk about also. I thought that was really interesting. But he occupies a unique role among medieval commentators in that his commentary has been cited by mainstream orthodoxy, but his works exhibit a reluctance to reconcile biblical passages through midrashic exegesis. Thus, in his commentary, Ibn Ezra adhered to the literal sense of the text, avoiding rabbinic allegory and Kabbalistic interpretation. Indeed, Ibn Ezra is claimed by proponents of the hierarchical criticism of the Torah as one of its earliest pioneers.
Thank you. I like what it says there. Thus, in his commentary, Ibn Ezra adhered to the literal sense of the texts, avoiding rabbinic allegory and Kabbalistic interpretation. Very interesting, since that when you consider his background of who he was.
Yeah.
We have some noise on here. Here we go with Rabbinical Essays by Jacob Z. Lauterbach. And you'll notice that he was from Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, and the date was 1951. Well, this man has a fair bit to say, so we're going to be reading a little bit. Before we proceed to describe the ceremonies of the entrance of the Sabbath, we must ascertain the exact time of her appearance. That is, at what time of the day the arrival of the Princess Sabbath was expected. This will help us to understand better certain features in the arrangements for welcoming her. As the Sabbath is the seventh day of the week and extends over one whole day, a brief discussion of the development of the Jewish system of reckoning the day is necessary to determine the time of the coming in and the going out of the Sabbath. There can be no doubt that in pre-exilic times, the Israelites reckoned the day from morning to morning. The day began with the dawn and closed with the end of the night following it. That would be the last darkness before dawn, and with the last moment before the dawn of the next morning. I guess I just could have kept reading, couldn't I? The very description of the extent of the day in the biblical account of creation as given in Genesis 1:5 presupposes such a system of reckoning the day, for it says, "And it was evening, and it was morning, one day." This passage was misunderstood by the Talmud. Read that again. This passage was misunderstood by the Talmud, though significantly enough when the Sofeta cites in proof Esther 4:16 where the order occurs, but does not cite the passage in Genesis, or was reinterpreted to suit the latter practice of a different system. But it was correctly interpreted by R. Samuel B. Neer in the 1100s when he remarked, "It does not say that it was nighttime and it was a daytime, which made one day, but it says it was evening, which means that the period of the daytime came to an end and the light disappeared." And when it says it was morning, it means that the period of the night came to an end and the morning dawned. Then one whole day was completed. There are many more indications in the Pentateuch pointing directly or indirectly to the mode of reckoning the day from the morning to morning. To mention but a few such indications, when prescribing that a thanksgiving offering must be consumed on the very same day on which the sacrifice is slaughtered, the law states, "On the same day it shall be eaten. Ye shall leave none of it till the morning," which directly indicates that the day comes to an end on the next morning. And when in special cases, as example, in regard to the Day of Atonement, where the law wishes to make the fasting on it stricter than any other fast day so as to include also the preceding night, the law specifically states that it should begin with part of the preceding day, and therefore expressly says, "And ye shall afflict your souls in the 9th day of the month at even. From even to even shall ye keep your Sabbath." This indirectly, but unmistakably points to a mode of reckoning from day, or reckoning the day from morning to morning. In post-exilic times, however, probably not later than the beginning of the Greek period, please note this next sentence, a change in the system of reckoning the day was made, and the day was reckoned as extending from the preceding to the following evening. Very interesting that Jacob Lauterbach recognizes that there was a change of reckoning the day, that it was a change made at one point. As might be expected, such a radical innovation was not immediately generally accepted. It took some time before it entirely supplanted the older system. In certain spheres of population, the older system continued to be in use, either exclusively or side by side with the newer system. Thus, in the temple service, the older system continued all through the time of the existence of the Second Temple, and there the day was reckoned from morning to morning, or as the Talmud puts it, in sacrificial matters, the night follows rather than precedes the day. We note again, that is in the Talmud. In some circles, or among some Jewish sects, the older system continued and the Sabbath was observed from Saturday morning to Sunday morning for those groups. As for the people of the time prior to the introduction of the new system, the night following the Sabbath and not the night preceding it formed part of the Sabbath. And the morning of Saturday, not Friday evening, marked the entrance of the Shabbat. So Jacob Lauterbach is very, very clear that he believes it goes from dawn to dawn. But the majority of the people followed the teachings of the Halakah. So why didn't they follow the Torah instead? Why did they choose the Halakah? And what happened? They reckoned the day from evening to evening, and the entrance of the Sabbath for them came after the sunset of Friday or on Friday evening. Note again, they were following the teachings of the Halakah. We do not see Torah there. All the arrangements for welcoming the Sabbath and the ceremonies connected with it were set for Friday evening. And we're jumping down to the purple writing again. For further proofs, see Morgenstern, to which I will add one point from the Passover legislation in Exodus 12, which is not pointed out there. The law in Exodus 12 prescribes that the Paschal lamb be slaughtered on the 14th day of the month and eaten at the following night, and that nothing of it be left till the next morning. The rabbis of the Talmud, who nowhere allude to and probably no longer knew of the earlier mode of reckoning the day, felt the difficulty in the phrase, "Ye shall afflict your souls on the 9th day." And when commenting on it, they said, "But are we to fast on the 9th day?" A very sound objection indeed. For if the day had in Bible times been reckoned from evening to evening, as it was in Talmudic times, then the phrase, "in the 9th day of the month at evening," contains a contradiction in terms. For the evening is already part of the 10th day. Charlene, I think you've heard this before. I'm quite positive of it. We've taught this numerous times. Continuing on here. Besides the special injunction, "From even unto even shall ye keep your Sabbath," would be entirely superfluous, for any other day also extends from evening to evening. And we are told that on the very same day, the 14th of the month, Yahuwah brought out the children of Israel from the land of Egypt. And in verse 42 of the same chapter, we read as follows, "It is a night of watching unto Yahuwah for bringing them out of Egypt." Now then, if they come out at night, that is, in the night following the 14th day, and it is said on the very same day, that is, on the 14th day they were brought out. It clearly indicates that the night following the 14th day is still part of that day, or the light season. The night follows the light season. Okay, let's just go into the red writing. The fact is that the rabbis of the Talmud no longer knew or would not acknowledge that in ancient times there was another mode of reckoning the day, according to which the evening preceding the 10th day still belongs to the 9th day. Okay, this is from Morgenstern, and it's on the 3 calendars of ancient Israel in the Hebrew Union College, and he's referencing this. The fact that the Samaritans also reckon the day from evening to evening would not be any argument against the fixing of this period for the innovation. For in the first place, we do not know the exact date the Samaritans finally and absolutely separated from the Jews. Furthermore, they may have accepted Jewish practices even after the separation, may independently of the Jews have interpreted the passage in Leviticus 23:32, "From even to even shall you keep your Sabbath," to apply to every Sabbath and holiday, and not only to the Day of Atonement. And I believe we have heard that before. where the reference to even shall keep your Sabbath means every Sabbath. I know I've heard it many, many times, but it's not quite that way. Jacob Lauterbach says, in my paper referred to above, I expressed the idea which was accepted by Morgenstern, that the statement in the Talmud that the men of the great synagogue instituted the ritual of Kiddush and Havdalah also points to the time of the beginning of the Greek period for the innovation of the system of reckoning the day from evening to evening. I'm going to read this again, and I'm going to start where it says that the statement in the Talmud that the men of the great synagogue instituted the ritual of Kiddush and Havdalah also points to the time of the beginning of the Greek period for the innovation of the system of reckoning the day from evening to evening, since the ceremonies of Kiddush and Havdalah are now observed on Friday evening and Saturday night, respectively. I would, however, now qualify this idea somewhat to the extent we must understand the Talmudic statement to refer to the last generation of the men of the great synagogue who lived after the beginning of the Greek period. Skip down to the next green box, the red writing. For the Talmud statement not only says that they instituted a ritual for consecrating the Sabbath at its entrance and for marking its distinction from the weekdays at its going out, but does not say when the coming in and going out of the Sabbath at the time when these rituals were first introduced took place. According to the Talmud, some changes as when or where the ritual of Havdalah should be recited were made even during the period of men of the great synagogue. It is therefore not possible that another change in the time for reciting these rituals also took place during the period of the men of the great synagogue. Or not, I should say not impossible. Forgive me. When the older generation of that period first instituted these rituals, they may have been recited at Sabbath morning and at Sunday morning, respectively. Then, when the reckoning of the day was changed, the times for reciting these rituals were correspondingly shifted to Friday and Saturday night, respectively. Sabbath, as the passage in Nehemiah 13:19-21, does not necessarily prove that already at the time of Nehemiah, the night preceding the Sabbath was part of the Sabbath as assumed by Bornstein. This simply means that in the sanctuary, the conservative priests persistently held on to the older practice, though in all other spheres of life, it had been abolished or changed. The fact that in the temple service, the night followed the day is another support for the theory that the innovation was introduced in the period of the men of the great synagogue. For it, sunset day had been introduced earlier in that period in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, before the temple was rebuilt and the sacrificial cult restored. It would have been introduced into the temple service also. And we're dropping down farther where it says, according to the Talmud, even among the common people, the older system continued, and in the popular language, the day included the following and not the preceding night. Likewise, the author of the gospel, according to Matthew, has preserved the older system, for we read there in 28:1, in the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn towards the first day of the week. So according to him, the Sabbath extended towards the dawn of the Sunday morning. Now this is really going to fly in front of the 12-hour Sabbath, because Matthew tells us that the Sabbath ended at dawn. So the question I would have at this point is, if there is such a thing as a 12-hour Sabbath day only, what type of Sabbath, the Hebrew word Sabbath, has the definition that means just a normal day where you can work? I have not found that Sabbath definition. So I must, for my own self, I accept that when he says the Sabbath ended at dawn, I accept that indicates strongly of a 24-hour Sabbath day. That's just my little rant. Let's continue on with Benjamin of Tudela. Benjamin of Tudela reports about a certain Jewish sect on the island of Cyprus whose members observed the Sabbath from Saturday morning to Sunday morning, or, as he puts it, who desecrated the night preceding, but kept holy the night following the Sabbath day. Interesting comment from him. According to S.A. Poznansky, in his introduction to Eliezer of Bogensi's commentary to Ezekiel and the 12 minor prophets, Ibn Ezra's attack in his Karim Hamed 5 from Prague in 1839 was directed not against R. Samuel Meir and his interpretation of Genesis, but against those heretical sects who drew practical conclusions from this interpretation and observed the Sabbath from morning to morning. But even among those who followed the Halakah allusion to the continuance of the older system and traces of an extension of the Sabbath rest to the night following Saturday are to be found. Thus, in commentating on the different expressions used respectively in connection with the commandments about the Sabbath in the two versions of the Decalogue, Exodus 20 verse 8 and Deuteronomy 5:12, the Makilta says, remember and observe. Remember it before it comes and observe it after it has gone. Okay, that is a very interesting comment. Remember it before it comes and observe it after it has gone. And I'm going to ask you to keep that in mind and think about it, question about it. Is this what we're supposed to do? Are we supposed to observe the Sabbath after it is gone? Just a thought. Here's Lauterbach's conclusion. How to remember the Sabbath before it comes is well illustrated there, but no illustration is given as to how the Sabbath is to be observed after it is gone. Instead of such an illustration, there is added the remark about the conclusions which the teachers drew from the interpretation of the word observe, as meaning, observe it after it has gone. This remark reads, hence the teachers said, we should always increase what is holy by adding to it some of the unholy. I'm going to read that one more time, and I want you to think about this remark very, very carefully. And I'm going to ask you, for the one that uses this statement and goes by it and acts upon it, does he declare himself God? Are we allowed to declare that which is holy and what is not? I'm going to read this sentence one more time. This remark reads, hence the teachers said, we, that would be man, should always increase that what is, or should, oh sorry, let me start over again. We should always increase what is holy by adding to it some of the non-holy. the implications of that statement goes a very long ways. And here's a quote from the Encyclopedic Dictionary of the Bible. The nighttime is considered as belonging to the preceding period of daylight. From this, there developed the meaning of day in the sense of the cycle made up of one period of daylight and one period of darkness, or, according to our modern reckoning, 24 hours. From the natural viewpoint, the 24-hour day begins at sunrise. However, beside this conception, there arose another idea of the 24-hour day, according to which this daily period began at sunset. Now, please pay attention to this. It was no doubt the lunar calendar of the Jews which gave rise to this viewpoint, although the earlier computation did not die out completely. The custom of considering the day as beginning at sunset became general in later Jewish times. That is another good quote to read over yourself at another time. Okay, we have another reader. April, can you help me out, please?
Sure. Pike's Commentary on the Bible, page 136. To the light he gives the name day, and to darkness the name night. Thus the work of the first day, reckoned probably from morning to morning, is accomplished. The period of light is followed by evening and darkness, which comes to an end with the next morning when the second day begins. The Handbook of Biblical Chronology, I can't say it, chronology, page 7 and 8. In the Old Testament, the earlier practice seemed to have been to consider that the day began in the morning. In Genesis 19:34, for example, the morning, ASV, or next day, RSV, clearly begins with the morning after the preceding light.
I'll go actually. The Oxford Companion to the Bible, page 744. In earlier traditions, a day apparently began at sunrise. Leviticus 7:15 to 17, Judges 19:4 to 19. Later, its beginning was at sunset and its end at the following sunset. This system became normative and is still observed in Jewish tradition, where, for example, the Sabbath begins on Friday evening at sunset and ends Saturday at sunset.
A very, very good quote. Very interesting. There's some pretty solid words in there.
International Standard Bible Encyclopedia, that the custom of reckoning the day as beginning in the evening and lasting till the following evening was probably of late origin, is shown by the phrase tarry all night, Judges 19:6-9. The context shows that the day is regarded as beginning in the morning. In the evening, the day declined, and until the new day morning arrived, it was necessary to tarry all night. Compare also Numbers 11-32.
Thank you. Thank you, Benedict. Stacy, can you read this one, please?
Yes. The itinerary of R. Benjamin of Tudela, like I was mentioning earlier, this man is from the same place as Ibn Ezra, which I found very interesting because they were both from the 12th century too. But this is, I think it's a 9 there, 5-8 edition, Gruhut Adler, 1904. It is also interesting, oh, I got to minimize this, you guys, I'm sorry, I can't see the whole screen. It is also interesting that according to the Karunite, I had to write this out on how to sound it out, historian Al Kirkwisanal, the dissident Meswi al-Okbari broke from traditional rabbinical Judaism in attempt to get back to the original religion and began the reckoning of the day from sunrise. And this Okbari man, when I looked him up, he was a convert to Christianity. So that's why they called him a dissident, I suppose. But that was interesting.
Yeah, thank you for looking that up. We appreciate that.
Well, I wanted to know who I was talking about.
And I think we should have you read it over again just to hear you pronounce the words.
No.
That was very good.
That was a little tough.
That's good, Stacy. We appreciate that.
No problem. Okay, there's more here. Handbook of Chronology, page 8. Among the Greeks, the day was reckoned from sunset to sunset. And here's another fun one. Delitzsch in Dillman's commentary on Genesis 1:5. Among the ancient Israelites, as among the Greeks, the day was reckoned from sunset to sunset. This was the custom also of the Gauls and ancient Germans, and was probably connected originally with the cult of the moon. There is, however, evidence that this was not the custom at all times.
Pretty interesting statement when it says they're probably connected originally with the cult of the moon. And note he says probably, but that's interesting. Okay, April, can you read this one for us, please?
The Lion Encyclopedia of the Bible, page 163. Early in the Old Testament period, when Canaan was under Egypt's influence, the day started at sunrise. Later, perhaps under the Babylonian influence, the calendar seemed to have changed. The day began at moonrise, 1800 hours, about 6 o'clock, and a whole day became an evening and a morning.
Thank you. I just find it really, really interesting when people that research this recognize that the calendar seems to have changed. Very interesting. Go ahead, April.
NIV Study Bible, page 707. The Israelites, like the Babylonians, counted their day from sunset to sunset.
Erdman's Handbook to the Bible. We know little about the old Israelite calendar, apart from the laws of the festivals, but the Mishnah, the collection of Jewish law made at the end of the 2nd century AD, fully describes the system which the Jews had worked out under Babylonian influence.
Very telling, those last 3 words, under Babylonian influence. Very, very interesting. Go ahead, Benedict. Thank you.
What is a Jew? Rabbi Morris and Kersner, page 108. When the Jews returned to Palestine after their Babylonian exile in 1516 BC, they brought back with them the Babylonian astronomy and the way of reckoning time.
Wow. It just keeps getting pronounced and more witnesses all the time. Okay, Stacy.
Okay. The Jewish Encyclopedia, pages 591 to 597. In order to fix the beginning and ending of the Sabbath day and festivals, and to determine the precise hour for certain religious observances, it becomes necessary to know the exact times of the rising and setting of the sun. According to the strict interpretation of the Mosaic law, every day begins with sunrise and ends with sunset.
Okay, and we remember Charlene admonished us earlier before we opened this up that when we see sunrise, we need to be thinking of dawn.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe these people didn't understand it to the extent that they should.
Right.
And when it says every day begins with sunrise, that actually means dawn, the very first light of dawn. Very good. Let's see what else we got here.
Now this was interesting to me. So we've got the New Catholic Encyclopedia, volume 11, page 1068. Days were reckoned from morning to morning. Following the reign of King Josiah, 640 to 609, and especially after the Babylonian exile, a number of significant and enduring changes occurred in the Israelite calendar, showing that the Jews gradually adopted the Babylonian calendar of the time. The 7-day week persisted despite its failure to divide evenly either the month or the year. The day, however, was counted from evening to evening after the Babylonian fashion. It's always the heathen.
Wow, this is one loaded quote. Loaded. You know, especially after the Babylonian exile and enduring changes occurred in the Israelite calendar and the Jews gradually adopting the Babylonian calendar. Wow. It says the day, however, was counted from evening to evening after the Babylonian fashion. Strong witness, very, very strong.
Yeah, and I thought, the New Catholic Encyclopedia, even they know this.
Yes, it's amazing what they know. Very, very amazing. Thank you. Okay, April.
Exact science of antiquity. As far as we know, the Babylonian calendar was at all periods truly lunar. The month began with the evening when the new crescent was at the first time again visible shortly after sunset. Consequently, the Babylonian day also began in the evening. The time of the crucifixion and the resurrection of Samuel Bakioki, chapter 5. Numerous scholars have argued for the existence in the Bible time of the sunrise method of day reckoning. The evidence for the sunrise reckoning is significant, and cannot be ignored.
Yes, and here once again we see the word sunrise, which should have been studied a little bit deeper, and it should read dawn to be correct with the Torah. Very good. Thank you, April. Okay, Benedict, can you help us out here?
Yes. The commentary on the Old Testament, the first book of Moses, page 51. Quote, "The first evening was not the gloom, which possibly preceded the first burst of light as it came forth from the primary darkness, and intervened between the darkness and full broad daylight. It was not till after the light had been created and separation of the light from the darkness had taken place that evening came. It follows from this that the days of creation are not reckoned from evening to evening, but from morning to morning."
What a witness. It was not till after the light had been created and the separation of the light from the darkness had taken place that evening came. How I would like to have a plane with a flag flying behind it and just fly that statement in the sky for everybody to read. So many times I've heard, the darkness was first, the darkness was first. What a great witness this one is. Thank you. The sources of the creation story, Genesis 1 to 2, verse 4. In early Jewish practice, it seems to have been customary to reckon the day from sunrise to sunrise. Let's read dawn to dawn there, please. Or rather, from dawn to dawn. Thus, the law for the praise offering, Leviticus 7:17, specifies that this sacrifice must be eaten on the day upon which it is offered, and that nothing may be left until the morning. The repetition of the law in Leviticus 22:30 is even more explicit. On that very day, when it was sacrificed, it shall be eaten. Ye shall not leave anything of it until morning. Clearly, the next morning is here reckoned as belonging to the next day, and not the same day as the preceding evening and night. In other words, The day is reckoned here from sunrise to sunrise. And we who have studied that know that means dawn to dawn. Likewise, in Exodus 16:19, the manna was given to the people in the morning, just at dawn and before the sun had become warm. It was to be eaten only on the day upon which it was gathered. Nothing was to remain over until the next morning. That which did so became foul. Here too, the day seems to have been reckoned from dawn to dawn. And from Matthew 28:1, it may be inferred that the practice of reckoning the day from sunset to sunset was not universal in Israel, but in certain circles, the older practice continued for several centuries. It is manifest that the day is still reckoned here from dawn to dawn. This is also the implication of the parallel passage, Mark 16:1 F. Luke 23:56b to 24:1 seems to imply the same. Finally, it is significant that in the Second Temple, throughout its entire existence, the practice seems to have been in all ritual matters to reckon the day from dawn to dawn, and not according to the later practice from sunset to sunset. Even the rabbis, who themselves reckoned the day from sunset to sunset and refused to admit the legitimacy of any other practice, or rather, absolutely ignored all divergent practice, nonetheless had to admit the validity of the interpretation of Leviticus 7:15. The day was at one time reckoned from sunrise to sunrise. That would be dawn to dawn. The earlier practice, which continued until the time of the secondary strata of the priestly code, was to reckon the day from dawn to dawn. The later practice was to reckon the day from sunset to sunset. It is impossible to tell exactly when this change in the mode of reckoning the day took place in Israel and what causes brought it about. Possibly, it may have been something to do with the introduction of the lunar calendar instead of the solar. And I'm going to read that one more time. Possibly, it may have had something to do with the introduction of the lunar calendar instead of the solar. For the lunar calendar naturally presupposes a reckoning of the day from nightfall to nightfall. It was probably coincident with the revision of the festival calendar, which took place in the period after the time of Ezra, and was, in all probability, the work of the Sopharim, or the Great Synod, in the 4th century BC. This may also be inferred from the statement in the Talmud that the men of the Great Synod instituted the ceremonies of Kiddush and Havdalah, the solemn sanctification of the Sabbath on Friday Eve, and its equally solemn ushering out on Saturday Eve, in other words. Ceremonies specially marked the beginning and close of the Sabbath as at sunset. These were ceremonies for the Jewish home instead of the temple. This, coupled with the fact that in the Second Temple, the old system of reckoning the day from dawn to dawn continued to be observed, as we have seen, may perhaps indicate that this entire innovation was the work of an anti-priestly group or party in the Great Synod. Stacy, can you help me with this one, please?
I lost my cursor. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Calendar in Community by Sasha Stern, A History of the Jewish Calendar, 2nd century BCE to 10th century CE. Note, losing the truth of the dawn day is largely due to the fact that the Jewish people exchanged the solar calendar for the pagan lunar calendar. In Sasha Stern's book, Calendar in Community, He describes an historical approach to the evolution of the Jewish calendar over the course of about 1100 years. This was when the calculated lunisolar Jewish calendar that is in use today was definitely established. And who is Sasha Stern? He's a professor of Rabbinic Judaism and head of department at the University College in London, Department of Hebrew and Jewish Studies. He holds many degrees in a variety of studies. He also studied at Yeshivot in Israel. Before joining UCL in 2005, he was a lecturer in Jewish Studies at Jews College, London, and then reader in Jewish Studies at, that's kind of cut off here, I think it's the School of Oriental and African Studies.
Yes, very good. This is interesting to me. I just marvel at this. Here is a man with an extreme Jewish background, extreme education in Rabbinic Judaism. And then look what he says.
Mm-hmm.
Losing the truth of the dawn day is largely due to the fact that the Jewish people exchanged the solar calendar for the pagan lunar calendar. What a statement for a man who is a professor of Rabbinic Judaism. This is just massively important. It's huge. Okay, what do we have next here? Supplementary studies in the calendars of ancient Israel. A new stage in the investigation of the problem of the calendar of ancient Israel was marked by the appearance of a learned article by E. Koenig in 1906. He maintains that two distinct calendars were current in the ancient Israel. The first, a solar calendar. This solar calendar was well adapted to the conditions of the simple agricultural life which the Israelites lived during the first period of their sojourn in Palestine. It reckoned the day from sunrise, or better yet, from dawn. And this is continued. The second calendar was a lunisolar calendar. The day now came quite naturally to be reckoned from sunset. This second calendar was obviously based upon Babylonian models and was adopted under direct Babylonian influence at about 600 BC. Please note that date. That is a relatively close date to Hezekiah's sundial incident. Just a little bit off, but pretty close. When the Babylonian religion and general culture began to affect with steadily increasing force the Jewish exiles in Babylonia, and those of them who returned from the exile, the Jews who had remained in Palestine at the time this broadly sums up Koenig's conclusions. The time of the transition from the reckoning of the day as beginning with the morning to the reckoning of it as beginning with the evening. That in the earlier calendar and in the literature which records this, the day was reckoned from the morning, presumably from sunrise, and we understand that is dawn, of course, while in the later calendar and the literature pertaining thereto, the day was reckoned from the evening. The sacrifice must be eaten upon the day upon which it is sacrificed, and that nothing of it must be allowed to remain over until morning. Obviously, the implication here is that the next morning is no longer a part of the day upon which the sacrifice was offered, but marked the beginning of the next day, and that is in full alignment with the Hebrew word, boker. Benedict, can you help me out, please?
Exposition of Genesis, C.H. Leopold, Volume 1, page 57 to 58. Noted Hebrew scholar C.H. Leopold explains, the verse Genesis 1:5, however, presents not an addition of items, but the conclusion of progression. On this day, there had been the creation of heaven and earth in the rough, then the creation of light, the approval of light, the separation of day and night. Now with evening, the divine activities ceased. They are works of light not works of darkness. The evening, Arab, of course, merges into night, and the night terminates with morning.
Wow, what a very simplistic way of stating it. Excellent. Go ahead, Benedict.
The screen is popping up.
Oh,
Exposition of Genesis, C.H. Leopold continued. But by the time morning is reached, the first day is concluded. As the account says, secondly, the first day, and everything is in readiness for the second day's task. For evening marks the conclusion of the day, and morning marks the conclusion of the night. It is these conclusions which terminate the proceedings that are to be made prominent. Leopold's point is simple, that after each day's creative activity, there followed evening, and when morning arrived, another day of creative activity began.
very well. I'm going to read that very first half of that sentence. But by the time morning is reached, the first day is concluded. How solid is that statement? That is so simplistic and solid. I love that.
Can I say something here? Do you mind?
Certainly, go ahead.
I was thinking this, I don't know, maybe 10 slides ago, and then Benedict read that. I was thinking, this is how he could explain it. He worked all day, and then there was the evening and the morning of the first day. It's like so simple, and that's exactly what he just read.
Yes. And the problem with it, though, is that it's so simple that many people miss it, because we have been taught that it is so convoluted and confusing, and we're expecting to see something that we can't understand. And when something this simple is presented in front of our eyes, sometimes it's difficult to take, even though it's simple. Okay, April, can you help us out with this one, please?
Okay. Study in Genesis 1, page 89, Edward J. Young. Edward Young, professor of the Tanakh Theology Seminar, summarizes the Hebrew text as follows. When the light was removed by the appearance of darkness, it was evening, and the coming of the light brought morning, the completion of a day. The days, therefore, are to be reckoned from morning to morning. Therefore, we may conclude that since a new day began on the morning of each of the 6 days of creation week, it would follow that God sanctified the Sabbath on the morning of the seventh day, not the evening of the sixth day. Thus, the first Sabbath, Genesis 2, 1 through 3, began in the morning rather than in the evening.
Stacy, can you read this one, please?
Yes, chronological aspects of the life of Christ. Harold W. Homer, page 87 and 88. However, rabbinic tradition on this subject is in fact mixed. Harold Homer demonstrates from the Mishnah that there were actually two systems of reckoning a day at the time of the Messiah. The Galileans and the Pharisees used the sunrise reckoning, or dawn to dawn, whereas the Judeans and Sadducees used the sunset to sunset reckoning. This view not only satisfies the data of the Synoptics and the Gospel of John, it is also substantiated by the Mishnah. It was the custom of the Galileans to do no work on the day of the Passover, while the Judeans worked until midday. The footnote reference is to Mishnah Pesachim 5 and 5, or 4 and 5. Since the Galileans' day began at sunrise, they would do no work on the entire day of the Passover. On the other hand, the Judeans' day began at sunset, and they would work the morning but not the afternoon.
Thank you, Stacy. That was a pretty interesting how the times that they would work and times they wouldn't work. Here's a question. Well, first a comment. If one is to lean heavily on the testimony of rabbinic tradition, he will be confronted with the question. That question is, which rabbinic tradition should be followed? Do the rabbis all agree with each other? I guess a better question would be, is there any that agree with each other? Here we go. The second day of the holidays in the diaspora. This is by Solomon Zeitlin. Note the Dropsy College for Hebrew and Cognate Learning in Philadelphia, 1953 and 54. In Deuteronomy 28:66, in the so-called Masoretic text, the reading is night and day. However, the Septuagint and the Targum, according to Jonathan, have day and night. Hence, the so-called Masoretic text here is faulty. In Jeremiah 14:17, our text has night and day. The Septuagint and the Peshitta have day and night. The reading in the so-called Masoretic text, again, is faulty. Something to think about. It would be very good if one studied about the Masoretic text and the style of belief of the people that wrote it to be sure of any hidden agenda. It is clear that when Yahuwah created the light and it went down, then the darkness or the night came. And when the light appeared again, that constituted one day. The solar calendar was used by the Hebrews before the time of the Restoration. Later, there was substituted for the solar calendar a lunar solar calendar. Previously, the year had begun with the spring. In the new calendar, the new year began with the autumn. The day began with the sunset, or when the stars became visible. This change of calendar aroused great protest among the Jews. The author of the book of Jubilees expressed his opposition in very strong words. Down to the purple writing, the author of the book of Jubilees complained that those who will make observations of the new moon will go wrong as to the beginnings of the Sabbaths. The author protested that by a change from a solar to a lunar calendar, the Sabbath would be disturbed, and the holy part of the Sabbath would be profaned, and the profaned part of the day would be made holy. Okay, Benedict, can you help us out with this one?
Some stages of the Jewish calendar. In Solomon Zeitlin's study in the early history of Judaism by Solomon Zeitlin, we know also that in the first 3 centuries of the present era, the early Christians had not yet separated themselves from the Jews and still kept their festivals according to the Jewish calendar. This is to say that the month had 30 days, which means again that the calendar of the Bible was a solar one. In a solar calendar, the day could not have started from the evening, according to the current practice in the Jewish calendar, but from the sunrise. And that is the meaning of the verse. There was evening and there was morning, the first day. That is to say, from sunrise to sunrise constituted one day, divided into 2 parts, day and night.
Can I get you to reread the first sentence of this last paragraph, please?
This is to say that the month had 30 days, which means, again, that the calendar of the Bible was a solar one.
Thank you. Very, very profound. Why? Because that's what I have found in the scriptures. Charlene and I have both found that, and I'm hoping that everybody else can see that too. These are some of the things that we read these quotes, and we must prove them from the scriptures, and mainly, primarily from the Torah. Thank you, Benedict. I appreciate that. Oh, here's another one for you. Good stuff.
The Book of Jubilees by Solomon Zeitlin, the Dropsy College for Hebrew and Cognate Learning. Furthermore, the author protects vigorously against the change from the solar to a solar-lunar calendar. This proves that the Book of Jubilees was written at the time when the calendar was changing from solar to solar-lunar time. And some Jews oppose this innovation, and they will confound all the days, the holy and the unclean day with the holy. For they will go wrong as to the months and Sabbaths and feasts and jubilees. How can we otherwise account for the author's forceful argument against the change of calendar, if we should assume that the book was written during the Maccabean period? The calendar had already been changed centuries earlier and had long ago become a dead issue.
Very interesting reasoning. And it is that type of reasoning that we need to read these books, these extracurricular books also, the Book of Jubilees, the books of Enoch, and things like that. We need to ask these questions that make us think, when was this written? Why and how? Very, very good. Thank you, Benedict. Stacy, can you read this one for us, please?
Yes. The observance of the Sabbath and the festivals in the first 2 centuries of the current, I think that says era, my little thing is blocking it here, according to Philo, Josephus, the New Testament, and the rabbinic sources by Jacob Mann in the collected articles of Jacob Mann. In Jamnia, it was the duty of the Nasi to preach on every Sabbath. At the beginning of the 2nd century, we hear of sermons delivered also on Friday night. And I looked at this Jamnia thing. There was actually a council of Jamnia, and they basically kicked the Christians out of the synagogue. So then you think about John 12, I think it's 42, where the Jews that began to believe wouldn't profess it outwardly because they didn't want to be kicked out of the synagogue. It was pretty interesting.
Thank you, Stacy. I appreciate you looking into that and sharing these little tidbits. These are things that help us to understand. Thank you.
And the Nazi, I couldn't find much on that, but they were like leaders and kings. Because I was like, well, who are these people? But that's what they were.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Here's another one for you.
Okay, I may have skipped ahead a little bit here. Okay, the Torah, a modern commentary edited by W. Gunther Plott. At what point did the civil day begin? There is some evidence that at one time the day was reckoned from sunrise to sunrise, but before the close of the biblical period, it had become standard to reckon the day from sunset to sunset, and this has been Jewish practice ever since. The language of verses 5 and 6 suggests that the evening when the sacrifice was performed and considered part of the 14th day, and that the 15th, the Matzah festival, did not begin until the next morning.
Yes. Very good point. Another one, Stacy.
Okay. The Book of Genesis, chapters 1 through 17, Victor P. Hamilton. The fact that evening is placed before the morning throughout this chapter is not a foolproof indication that the Old Testament reckons a day from sunset to sunset. There is some evidence that strongly suggests that the day was considered to begin in the morning at sunrise. For example, this view is supported by the fact that when the Old Testament refers to a second day, the time referenced is the morning. Genesis 19:33-34 and Judges 6:38 and 21:4. Similarly, the phrase day and night is much more frequent than night and day. Thus, it seems likely that this refrain in Genesis refers not to the computation of a day, but rather to the vacant time till the morning, the end of a day and the beginning of the next day.
Wow. Witness after witness. This is great. Ancient Israel, its life and institutions. Roland de Vaux. As everywhere, the basic unit is the solar day. The Egyptians reckoned it from one morning to the next and divided it into 12 hours of daytime and 12 of night. The hour varied in length with the latitude and the season. In Israel, the day was for a long time reckoned from morning to morning. When they wanted to indicate the whole length of a day of 24 hours, they said day and night, or some such phrase, putting the day first. This suggests that they reckoned the day starting from the morning, and it was in fact the morning, with the creation of light that the world began. Ooh, let me read that again. This suggests that they reckoned the day starting from the morning, and it was in fact the morning, with the creation of light that the world began. There's light again first. Wow. Time too began on a morning. There was an evening and there was a morning, the first, second day, etc. This phrase, however, coming after the description of each creative work. And Stacy, you just stressed that, where the work comes first, and after that comes the evening. And this clearly happens during the period of light and indicates rather the vacant time till the morning, the end of a day and the morning, the end of a day and the beginning of the next work. Nehemiah, to prevent the merchants breaking the Sabbath, orders the gates of Jerusalem to be shut at nightfall before the Sabbath, and not to be opened till after the Sabbath. Nehemiah 13:19. Here the day seems to begin at sunset. According to Leviticus 7:15 and 22:30, the meat of sacrifices must be eaten the same day, not leaving anything to be eaten to the morning of the next day. Had the day begun in the evening, the wording would have ordered the meat to be eaten before the evening. All this presumes that the day began in the morning. The change of reckoning must therefore have taken place between the end of the monarchy and the age of Nehemiah. One could date it more precisely if it were certain that in Ezekiel 33:21-22, the evening and the morning of verse 22 both applied to the fifth day of verse 21. This would bring us to the beginning of the exile. Unfortunately, the text is not explicit. And here's a commentary on the book of Genesis. This is by Israel Abrahams. The Magnus Press, Hebrew University in Jerusalem, 1944. And there was evening and there was morning one day. When daytime had passed, the period allotted to darkness returned, and there was evening. And when nighttime came to an end, the light held sway a second time, and there was morning. And this completed the first calendar day, one day, which had begun with the creation of light. An examination of the narrative passages of the Bible makes it evident that whenever clear reference is made to the relationship between a given day and the next, it is precisely sunrise that is accounted the beginning of the second day. Question: where was the sunrise on day 1 and day 2 for the top paragraph? Just an interesting thought, interesting question. So too in Leviticus 23:32, with regard to the Day of Atonement, thus the evening before the 10th is called the 9th of the month. It will thus be seen that throughout the Bible there obtains only one system of computing time, The day is considered to begin in the morning. But in regard to the festivals and appointed times, the Torah ordains that they shall be observed also on the night of the preceding day. And read the question. Does it? Got to think about this carefully. Do we just take these statements at face value, or do we test them with the Torah? Well, continuing on, this point is explicitly emphasized whenever a certain precept has to be observed, particularly at night, like the eating of unleavened bread on the night of Passover and fasting on the evening of the Day of Atonement. Question again. We need to prove things from the Torah. In the case of the Sabbath and the other festival days, however, there was no need to stress that work was prohibited on the night preceding, since agricultural tasks, and it is specifically that these that the Torah has in mind, are performed only by day. There is no discrepancy, therefore, in our verse at all. The Talmud, the Steinsaltz edition. This is by Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, the Israel Institute for Talmudic Publications. In Hebrew, as in many other languages, this word has two meanings: a unit of time lasting 24 hours and daytime as distinct from the nighttime. The Halakhic day of 24 hours usually begins at nighttime with the appearance of 3 medium-sized stars. Hence, according to the Talmud, the day follows the night rather than the other way around. An exception occurs, however, with regards to the laws of the temple service. In this case, the day is considered to begin in the morning at dawn or at sunrise, and hence, as far as these laws are concerned, the night follows the day. A 1935 Supplementary Studies in the Calendars of Ancient Israel by Julian Morgenstern. E. Koenig, 1906, maintains that 2 distinct calendars were current in ancient Israel. The first, a solar calendar, was identical practically with that of the Phoenicians and the Canaanite predecessors of Israel in Palestine. This solar calendar was well adapted to the conditions of the simple agricultural life which the Israelites lived during the first period of their sojourn in Palestine. It reckoned the day from sunrise and the year from an appropriate day in the fall. It employed the old Canaanite Phoenician names of the months. These were solar months of apparently 30 days each. The Asif, later the Sukkot festival, came at the end of the year. The second calendar was a lunar solar calendar which operated with lunar months alone, and in consequence must have had some system of intercalation by which the lunar and the solar years were harmonized. These lunar months were designated at first by ordinal numbers, first month, second month, etc., but eventually the Babylonian names Nisan and Iyar, etc., were equated with and frequently substituted for them. A lunisolar year naturally necessitated increased cognizance of the moon and its phases. The day now came quite naturally to be reckoned at sunset, and the day of the full moon in each month came to play an increasingly important role in the calendar organization, so that the Passover, Matzot festivals, and the Sukkot festival were transformed from their original moments of celebration to the full moons of the 1st and 7th month, respectively. Do you understand the implications of that last statement? Very, very, very solid. At the first New Year's Day continued to be celebrated upon V11 and 10, but later upon V11/1. Eventually, however, the New Year's Day was transferred to I-1. This latter system of dating and celebrating the New Year's Day, however, did not supplant the older method of celebrating this important festival upon V11-1. For quite a long period, both systems seem to have existed simultaneously. Eventually, however, the latter system succumbed to the older system. And ever since, New Year's Day has been observed in the Jewish calendar upon the 1st of Tishri. This second calendar was obviously based upon the Babylonian models and was adopted under direct Babylonian influence at about 600 BC, when Babylonian religion and general culture began to affect with steadily increasing force the Jewish exiles in Babylonia, and through those of them who returned from the exile and the Jews who remained in Palestine. 1935, Supplementary Studies in the Calendars of Ancient Israel. Again, Julian Morgenstern, I should say, sorry. Sanctuary and the Equinox. That it was possible under the system of Calendar 1 to determine exactly the dates of the spring and fall equinoxes, I have shown conclusively in M11. These were the 2 days in the year upon which the first rays of the rising sun shone straight through the eastern gate of the Temple of Jerusalem, opened for this specific moment, and down the long aisle of the temple into the Devir, or Holy of Holies, at its western end. This institution made it possible to determine the exact length of the solar year with almost mathematical precision. Here's a picture of the temple and what's going to happen on the equinox. The sanctuary design determines equinox. The sanctuary always faced east with 2 pillars at the front. There's Yakin and there's Boaz. That's the name of the 2 pillars. Here's your equinox light, that on the day of the equinox, it would shine straight through right into the Holy of Holies. On the summer solstice, it would shine off at an angle into the other corner. And in the winter solstice, it would shine off at an angle to the opposite corner. Therefore, and it would designate the day of the equinox with absolute, just incredibly precise accuracy. That's the design of the temple. The priests had their backs to the sun, except in Ezekiel 8. And what were they doing? They were worshiping the sun. Why would Yahuwah design his sanctuary to receive these lights if the equinox is completely linked to paganism? Good question. Now it is time to understand as much as possible of Yahuwah's covenant calendar. As the internet increases with information, each one needs to have the tools to discern the truth from any error, great or small. In future presentations, secular historical quotes will also be offered for the Choshek month and the Shaneh year. Be prepared with good discernment. And if you have any questions, go ask Charlene real quick. Okay, that's it for today for the quotes. I'm going to do stop share here and we can take some questions.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for reading, and the variety was really nice. And I don't know about you, but this was good for me to read over again. And I had some very favorite commentators. But did you notice that some of these commentators realized when the day began, like way back in 1000 AD, that's over 1,000 years ago. And in my research, these rabbis were a few of them, just a few of them scattered over all of these thousands of years, were one lonely little voice in their time frame trying to get the Jewish people to come back to the calendar and the day start according to probably what we're finding right now. But they were in a minority and the leaders had the majority and their voices were silenced. Did you notice that there was lots of quotes from 1950, 1981, and 1983? These quotes from these commentators have been spread all the way through history. But we need to find the quotes that actually align with the Torah truths. So this is nothing new. This is nothing new under the sun. It's been there all the time, and these quotes are coming out. So I'm just really happy for the review again. Thanks a lot, all the readers. We really appreciate it. It was good, wasn't it?
Yes, I appreciate the readers too, very, very much. And I appreciate when they make mistakes too, because it helps me when I make mistakes. Thank you.
May I make a comment?
Certainly.
You mentioned Benjamin of Tudela twice. Do you realize that in his lifetime he traveled to Jerusalem, and he's the one that put the stamp on the Fortress Anatolia as the Temple Mount?
No, I did not realize that. Can you get us more information on that?
Well, I'll have to go back to my I'll bring it up in the future. But it was him, who gave them this is the Temple Mount, and since then it's been a tradition. Back in the around 1000, or somewhere in there. I'll get the exact date and everything, and where to find it.
We would welcome you to show us that on Fellowship sometime, because there is so much controversial information on the Temple Mount. So I hope you can do that for us. That would be great, Manuel.
Yeah, unfortunately, since I'm of Spanish descent, it falls on me because he was from Spain.
Oh yeah.
So I'll get the information and I'll bring it on the Fellowship.
Very good.
Okay, and even next week, if you can track it down that quickly, because it's a free week next week. We're not having a formal study or a formal hangout. It's just going to be who's ever here. And so whoever gets those quotes, if it's next week, write them down so those of us that aren't there can have it too. Thanks, Manuel.
I just go into the internet. I know where to find the books and everything.
Yes,
Anybody
April.
else?
April.
Yes, I have a question. If you could put it in kind of a short little phrase or something. You kept on saying when the calendar changed, and it was, I can't even remember the name of it, but in conversations when you're witnessing to someone, is there just something simple that you could say, blah, 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 this happened and the calendar changed at that time? Is there just something short and snappy that you can say during this time frame, so-and-so or such and such a book entered the change of the calendar?
I
would like to say that I would like to say, April, that changes don't happen overnight. And unfortunately, that's what people want. Whether it's from a scriptural document or from the scriptures itself, they want to have the one little verse in the Bible in black and white where it tells you this. But the changes were gradual. And we did some of those studies in the moon presentations, I think number 8 and 9. We showed some of the history. And, I would just give a nugget statement, and then I would tell the people that they need to read their Old Testament with calendar in mind, and they need to watch where these changes happened. Basically, it was Abraham's father, Terah, that brought the moon-worshipping gods out of Babylon. Yeah. It was those gods that were the snag to the fathers, okay, all the way up to Joshua. in the last chapter of Joshua, he asked the people, who are you going to serve? The gods of your fathers or the true God?